Pam Bondi had been mocked, dismissed, and challenged to prove herself on stage. What followed not only turned the tables but also humbled everyone watching. This event unfolded during a podcast episode that no one expected to go viral. The guest was Jackson Weller, an indie rock musician from Portland known for his progressive views and sharp wit. He was in the middle of recounting a story about performing at a fundraiser when the host casually asked, "Ever run into anyone from politics backstage?" Jackson chuckled, took a sip of his drink, and leaned into the microphone. "Pam Bondi was at one of those events," he said with a smirk. "Nice lady, I guess, but she looked at the grand piano like it was IKEA furniture. Doubt she could tell middle C from a cup of coffee." The room burst into laughter. It was the kind of remark that landed well with his usual audience, young, left-leaning, and skeptical of anyone with political ties. Jackson was known for these offhand jabs, and most people didn't take him too seriously. But this time his words stuck. Clips of that moment quickly spread on social media. Within hours, the quote had been trimmed, looped, and turned into memes, with captions like "Jackson calls out Pam Bondi with a musical burn," and "Pam, do you even know what a piano is?" Pam didn't respond immediately. In Tampa, she sat at her kitchen counter as her phone buzzed. Her niece had sent her the clip with a crying laugh emoji. Pam watched it once, then again. She didn't flinch, didn't roll her eyes. She simply sighed, calmly closed the video, and slid the phone face down. Her tea had gone cold, but she didn't delete the clip. Jackson wasn't finished. A week later, he mentioned Pam again in an interview with a Seattle-based online magazine. "I guess she's lawyer smart, sure, but I doubt she's got a creative bone in her body," he said. "You can't fake art. Either you feel it or you don't." His words made it worse, shifting from a harmless joke to something more biting, more personal. Some fans brushed it off, while others felt uncomfortable. A few older followers started commenting, "Is this really necessary?" And just play music, man. But Jackson didn't take notice or didn't care. He was heading to Florida the following month for a tour. He figured the controversy would fade away. What he didn't know was that Pam had just received a last-minute invitation to a high-profile charity event in Sarasota, a music and arts fundraiser for children. The same event Jackson had committed to performing at. The lineup was a mix of local politicians, celebrities, philanthropists, and artists. Pam wasn't planning on speaking or taking the stage. She was attending as a silent donor, preferring to stay in the background and support the cause. She hadn't performed publicly in over 15 years, but something was shifting now. That week, she went into her guest room, pulled off the sheet covering her upright piano, and ran her fingers over the keys. It was out of tune, stiff from years of disuse. She smiled to herself, then grabbed her phone. "Hey, Dan," she said, calling her old music instructor from law school. "Still tuning pianos?" Meanwhile, Jackson continued his press tour. During a radio interview in Clearwater, he joked again about Pam. "Maybe she'll bring her sheet music," he laughed. "Who knows? Maybe she'll surprise us with chopsticks, but he didn't know was that Pam had been practicing nearly every day. She had already chosen the piece she would play, and she had no intention of speaking, just playing. As the event date neared, not everyone would be laughing when it was her turn. Pam Bondi's public image had always been carefully curated. Sharp suits, confident statements, and camera-ready smiles. For years, that's all people knew about her: prosecutor, politician, Fox News contributor, a woman who kept things measured and deliberate. But there was another side to her that most never saw. Before law school, before politics, and before the headlines, there had been music. Pam grew up in Dunedin, Florida. Her father was the town's fire chief, and her mother taught Sunday school and played piano at church every Thursday afternoon. Pam would walk 3 blocks from school to Mrs. Donatelli's house, where an old Baldwin upright piano sat in the living room, just a few feet away from the smell of lemon polish and old books. She was 8 when she first touched the keys and 10 when she fell in love with Chopin. Mrs. Donatelli was strict. She would tap the edge of the piano bench with a ruler whenever Pam slouched or dropped her fingers. "Feel the space," she'd say. "Don't just press notes, tell the truth." By 15, Pam could play sonatas from memory. At 16, she won second place at the Tampa Bay Youth Music Competition, narrowly losing first place after freezing in the middle of a Debussy piece. That loss stung, and she never forgot the silence in the room when she stood up and walked off the stage without finishing. She didn't cry. She simply folded the program into a neat square and kept it in her wallet for years. But life had other plans. Her parents divorced, and college came quickly. Music, though still within her, became quieter. She pursued criminology and then law, telling herself she'd return to music later when things calmed down. They never did. Years passed. Her career took over. Long work days, press briefings, courtrooms, and campaign trails. The piano stayed in her guest room, gathering dust beneath old books and framed photos. People stopped asking about her hobbies, and most assumed she had none. Even her closest colleagues never knew about the piano. Only one person ever brought it up again, a man named Grant Halberg. Grant had been a deputy prosecutor, a few years younger than her, with a quiet demeanor. During a particularly tough case in 2007, the two started working late nights in the office. One evening, over bad takeout, Grant noticed sheet music in Pam's briefcase. She froze when he pointed it out. "You play?" he asked. "Used to," she replied. "What piece?" he asked. She hesitated. "Nocturne in C-sharp minor." He raised an eyebrow. "Seriously? That's not beginner stuff." She nodded and went back to eating. Nothing more was said. A few weeks later, on her birthday, Grant left a small envelope on her desk. Inside was a single music page, just the opening bars of that nocturne, along with a sticky note that read, "Don't wait forever." He died 5 months later from a brain aneurysm, with no warning. Pam never threw away the note. Years later, when her niece sent her the viral clip of Jackson Weller joking about her and the piano, Pam didn't just hear a jab. She felt that same sting she'd felt when she walked off the stage at 16. It wasn't anger or embarrassment. It was a quiet push, a reminder. By the time the Sarasota charity event arrived, Pam had been practicing nearly every night for 4 weeks. Her hands were stiff at first, but her muscle memory returned faster than expected. She kept the sessions private, no recordings, no lights, just her, the keys, and a promise she hadn't realized she'd made to herself long ago. The piece she chose wasn't random. It was the same one she never finished playing on stage, Debussy's Clair de Lune. As the event drew closer, Pam's name appeared on the guest list as a donor, with no public statements or hints of anything. Unusual. Jackson Weller didn't notice, or if he did, he didn't make the connection. He had his set list ready, industry friends flying in, and expected a fun, easy night with some press, drinks, and applause. He thought he'd throw in a cheeky comment or two, maybe even poke fun at Pam again as usual. What he didn't realize was that Pam wasn't there for attention. She was there for the music. But when the stage wasn't his anymore, things would start to change in a way no one saw coming. The Ritz-Carlton ballroom in Sarasota glimmered under soft lights, the kind that made every cocktail dress look tailored and every glass of champagne seem a little more elegant. It was a charity event, but also a social gathering for Florida's well-connected, featuring silent auctions, catered shrimp towers, and a Steinway grand piano placed near the center stage, awaiting its moment of recognition. The theme was art for the next generation, raising funds for local school music programs. Pam Bondi arrived just after 7:15 p.m., dressed in a black satin dress and simple heels. She didn't bring a +1, and she didn't alert the press. She hadn't been on stage in years, and she didn't plan on being there that night, unless the moment called for it. Across the room, Jackson Weller was already in performance mode. He wore a brown suede jacket and an open-collared shirt. His guitar case leaned against a nearby table as he conversed with 2 local journalists and a fellow musician from Miami who had opened for him earlier that year. He didn't notice Pam at first. She stayed near the edge of the room, sipping seltzer and chatting with a few people she knew from her days in office. No one mentioned pianos. She didn't bring it up either. Then, somewhere between the third tray of mini crab cakes and the opening remarks. Jackson spotted her. Without hesitation, he approached her, ready to score easy points in front of the crowd. His voice was loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "Well, well," he said, lifting his glass. "The legend herself." Pam turned slowly, her expression unreadable. "Jackson," she said with a polite nod. "Glad you made it," he said. "Didn't know art fundraisers were your thing." "They are," she replied, "especially when kids benefit." He raised an eyebrow. "Right. Music education and all that." He leaned in closer. "Say, by any chance, can you tell the difference between a Steinway and a side table?" A few nervous laughs echoed through the room. Pam didn't flinch. She simply looked at Jackson, her gaze unwavering. "Is that how you usually talk?" "At charity events?" she asked, her tone even. Jackson shrugged casually. "Just trying to keep it light. You've got a sense of humor, right?" He grinned, hoping to get a laugh. He was far from finished, though, his ego still buzzing from the wine. He gestured toward the grand piano sitting on the stage. "How about it?" he challenged. "Prove me wrong." Pam paused, weighing his words. The air around them shifted, the atmosphere growing tense, yet still, she didn't react with anger. She simply spoke, her voice calm but firm. "I don't play for people who want me to fail." Jackson's confidence faltered for a split second, but she wasn't done. "But I'll play for the kids." With that, she stood and walked past him toward the stage. She didn't rush. There was no dramatic exit or grand speech, just a quiet, controlled movement, as if she had made her decision long ago and was only now acting on it. Jackson froze, caught off guard. He had expected her to laugh it off or shoot back with another jab, but instead she had just accepted the challenge. She made her way to the piano, exchanged a few quiet words with the sound technician, and took her seat. The room grew quieter. Phones began to rise, not in a frenzy but with an air of curiosity, as if everyone knew something unexpected was about to unfold. Pam adjusted the bench and placed her hands in her lap. She didn't speak to anyone, just closed her eyes for a moment, steadying herself. Then her fingers hovered above the keys and the room held its collective breath. Jackson remained at the back of the room, watching. His friend leaned over and whispered, "You might have messed up, man." Jackson didn't respond. He couldn't. His mind was already shifting, a feeling of uncertainty settling in his chest. The first note hadn't even been played yet, but he felt it. Pam's fingers pressed the keys and the opening notes of Clair de Lune filled the air, soft, smooth, and undeniable. It was delicate, like a stream of water finding its course. At first the crowd was still unsure. Some wondered if it was pre-recorded, but then they noticed the movement of her hands, the steady sway of her body as she lost herself in the music. This wasn't just some show. Pam wasn't putting on a party trick. She was playing, and it was honest, real. And suddenly Jackson felt something. He hadn't anticipated this depth. The music wasn't just a display. It was an expression of something more. He hadn't even recognized the piece at first, but as it unfolded, the melancholy of the melody sank in. It wasn't just beautiful. It was heartbreaking in its grace. The crowd remained hushed, absorbed in the moment. The clicks of cameras filled the silence, but even those sounds seemed muted, as if the room itself didn't want to break the spell. Jackson, standing at the back, closed his eyes for a moment, transported to another time, a night years ago in a small club in San Francisco. He'd been nervous, his fingers fumbling over chords, but there was a woman in the crowd who was swaying to his music, her smile telling him she could hear something in his performance that no one else could. That moment had stuck with him, but now, in the presence of Pam, it felt distant. Pam's hands continued their fluid, effortless dance across the piano, each note laden with meaning. The piece slowed, drifting toward a long, aching chord before coming to a sudden, graceful silence. She paused for just a moment, then closed the piano lid gently. No grand flourish, no applause-seeking gesture, just a soft conclusion. For a full 10 seconds, the room remained still, Then it erupted into applause, not polite clapping, but genuine, spontaneous recognition. People rose to their feet, clapping louder as the room's energy shifted from disbelief to admiration. Pam didn't smile. She didn't need to. She returned to her seat, sipping her seltzer, her composure unshaken. Jackson, still standing at the back, didn't approach her. He stood there watching, his mind processing the unexpected humbling. His friend leaned in once more. "You okay?" Jackson blinked, trying to gather himself. I think I just got humbled." Later, when Jackson took the stage for his set, his usual swagger had diminished. He adjusted his guitar strap, and before he started, he turned to the crowd. "Am I changing the set list?" he said, his tone quieter than usual. A few people chuckled, but his face was serious. "Before I play," he continued, "I want to say something. When I was younger, I used to think I could read people, that I could size them up and know what they had inside. Turns out I've been pretty arrogant." He paused, looking toward Pam. "And I owe someone an apology." The room went silent again. Jackson strummed his guitar softly, singing a raw, stripped-down version of one of his older songs. Without the usual effects or loops, it was just him, the chords, and a voice that carried the weight of honesty. When he finished, the applause came, just as real, just as sincere as it had been for Pam. Pam didn't clap. She just listened, and that was enough. The night didn't end there. By the next morning, videos of Pam playing the piano had gone viral. One shaky, handheld clip, filmed from behind a table of wine glasses, had already surpassed 1 million views. The caption read, "Pam Bondi just silenced a room with Debussy." Twitter exploded with reactions. Some praised her, saying things like, "Didn't have Pam Bondi playing Claire de Lune on my 2025 bingo card, but here we are. Say what you want about her politics, that was pure, raw talent." Others were skeptical, accusing the event of being staged. "No way, she just pulled that out of nowhere. PR stunt. What's next? DeSantis breakdancing?" But the skeptics were drowned out by a deeper sense of wonder. Curiosity about how someone so easily stereotyped by the media could possess such grace and quiet strength. Jackson, meanwhile, stayed silent. He didn't post anything, didn't respond. Instead, he sat in his hotel room, guitar across his lap, struggling to write. There were no new lyrics, no chord progressions, just a heavy feeling in his chest, something he couldn't quite define. He replayed the moment in his mind, Pam at the piano, each note hanging in the air. It wasn't just that she played well. She played with a depth he hadn't seen in a long time. And she did it without needing anyone's approval or applause. It reminded him of something his old music teacher had said back in Los Angeles. Real musicians don't play to be understood. They play because they understand something no one else can say out loud. For the first time in years, Jackson understood what that meant. Pam, on the other hand, stayed quiet. The next day, she returned home, greeted her dog, watered the plants, and slipped back into her routine. She didn't seek out interviews, didn't appear on morning shows. She declined a request from Good Morning America and ignored a flattering message from a music publication that wanted to feature her in a story titled The Secret Virtuoso. She wasn't interested in the spotlight. She had already said what she needed to say. Pam didn't want to be a symbol or a headline. She'd already said what she needed to say, and it was in the music. But she did reply to one email. It was from a 16-year-old girl in Arizona who had watched the video online. She wrote, "I'm not into politics, but I've been scared to sign up for piano class because I'm not very good. Yet after watching you bust, I think I'll try anyway." Pam stared at the message for a long time before typing 2 lines back. "Thank you, and remember the key is not to be perfect, just be honest." That night, Jackson posted something. It wasn't flashy, just a photo of a blank notebook, his guitar, resting beside it with a caption that read, "Starting over." He lost a few followers who called him soft, gained a few more who thanked him for showing humility. But the biggest shift wasn't online. It was in him. A few weeks later, he performed, at a small theater in Pensacola. Nothing fancy, no band, just him, a stool, and his guitar. Midway through the show, he paused. "I learned something recently," he told the audience. "Sometimes we're so busy trying to tear down people we disagree with, we forget they're whole human beings. And sometimes they've got more to say than we ever gave them credit for." Then he did something no one expected. He sat at the venue's old upright piano, cracked his knuckles, and played Clair de Lune. Badly, really badly. He stopped after a few bars and laughed. Okay, I'm no Pam," he said, grinning. The audience erupted, and in that moment something real happened. A wall came down, but not just between two people. Between noise and meaning. Between mockery and grace. By the end of the week, the clip had reached national outlets. It was picked up by CBS News, Rolling Stone, and even made a brief mention on The Tonight Show. Not because Pam Bondi was trending as a politician, but because someone unexpected had shattered the public's assumptions without saying a single word. The algorithms loved it. So did the people. It wasn't just about music. It was about being wrong loudly and then being corrected quietly with dignity. One of the most shared comments under the video came from a middle-aged man in Iowa. "I've disagreed with her on almost everything, but that was stunning. I feel small forever thinking she was just a headline." Another one from a 22-year-old in Los Angeles. It wasn't about right or left in that moment. It was about seeing someone fully for the first time. That's what stuck. The realization was profound. We all reduce people, especially public figures, to whatever fits our beliefs. A soundbite, a party line, a tweet. But when Pam sat down at that piano, she reminded everyone that real people don't fit in tweets. Even Jackson's fan base, who had originally laughed along with his piano jokes, turned the conversation around. A thread from one of his longtime listeners read, "Watch Jackson Challenger thought it'd be funny, but what she did wasn't just piano. That was years of something she carried, waiting to be released. We don't know half of what people are made." Pam's name started trending in a different way, not as a politician but as a person. A woman who had been underestimated, mocked, and then calmly reminded the world of her depth without ever clapping back. And while she didn't comment publicly, her silence spoke louder than any press release. Jackson, for his part, kept things low-key. No official statement, no interview, but he did share a second post that week. A photo of an old upright piano in a small studio room captioned, "Lessons resume Monday." He'd enrolled in private lessons in Gainesville, saying he was tired of pretending he knew it all. Some called it PR cleanup, others saw it for what it was, growth. What no one could deny was that something had shifted, not just in Jackson or Pam, but in how people talked about them. For a few days, the online world stopped shouting and started listening. Clips from the Sarasota event kept surfacing. Someone uploaded the full 8-minute video of Pam's performance. In it, you could see every detail. The way she took a breath before beginning, the stillness in her hands between movements, the crowd's subtle transformation from amused to moved. A YouTube comment said it best. This wasn't a gotcha moment. It was a moment of grace in a world full of noise, and that's why it resonated. Because it wasn't about politics, it wasn't even about talent, it was about how wrong we can be when we assume people are only what we've heard about them. Pam didn't trend for yelling. She didn't trend for tearing anyone down. She trended because she showed up, stayed calm, and did the one thing nobody expected. She spoke through beauty, and beauty, real beauty, doesn't argue. It doesn't defend itself. It just is. Back in Tampa, Pam's piano was tuned, now cleaner, warmer. She played in the evenings again, not for anyone else, just for herself. Sometimes just a scale, sometimes the same 3 bars over and over. No need for applause, no audience required. It had never been about proving anything, but in that moment, she had reminded everyone watching of a truth they'd forgotten. People are always more than the sum of their headlines. But stories like this only last if we carry them forward. And the final lesson hadn't been spoken just yet. It would have been easy to write it off as a fluke, some weird viral moment that came and went like all the others. But this one stuck. It kept getting shared, not just because Pam played beautifully, but because the moment felt honest. And honesty is rare, especially when it shows up unannounced. For a while, it sparked a real conversation online about judgment, about ego, about how easy it is to dismiss someone without ever knowing who they really are. Everyone had their version of the story, but no matter which angle people came from, political, musical, emotional, the takeaway was the same. We assume too much, we listen too little, and we forget that everyone is carrying something they don't talk about. Pam's years at the piano weren't about showing off. They were about process, escape, peace. The fact that she never once brought it up, even when she was mocked on national platforms, wasn't modesty. It was restraint, self-respect, knowing who you are so deeply that you don't need to prove it every time someone throws a stone. On the flip side, Jackson's journey was just as real. He could have doubled down, posted something snarky, kept the joke going. A lot of people in his position would have, but he didn't. He listened. He watched. And when it became clear he'd misjudged someone, he let himself feel that. Not publicly, not perfectly, but clearly. That kind of shift doesn't get millions of views, it doesn't make headlines, but it matters because that's how we change. Quietly, slowly, one layer at a time. Weeks later, Pam got a letter. Not an email, a real letter, handwritten in blocky cursive. It was from a middle school music teacher in rural Tennessee. I showed the video to my class. They were stunned, not just by the music, but by what it meant. I asked them afterward what they took from it. One kid said, "She didn't yell. She just played." That's gonna stick with them. Honestly, it stuck with me, too. Pam folded the letter neatly and placed it inside a drawer near her piano. She never replied. She didn't need to. That moment in Sarasota was never about fame or redemption. It wasn't a political stunt. It wasn't even about proving someone wrong. It was about showing what it looks like when someone knows exactly who they are and doesn't let noise, mockery, or public opinion shake that foundation. There's a lesson in that for all of us. We live in a time where calling people out has become sport, where assumptions go viral faster than facts, and where it's easier to shout into a void than to pause and wonder what someone's life might actually look like off camera. But that night reminded people of something. We're starving for depth, grace, surprise, humanity. You don't have to like someone to recognize their talent. You don't have to agree with someone to acknowledge their worth. And you don't have to clap back when you can simply let your actions speak louder than your critics. Pam never asked for applause. She just played. And maybe that's the real lesson here. Don't speak unless it adds value. Don't fight unless it matters. And never assume you know someone just because you've seen their name on a team. Because one day, you might find yourself in a room, thinking you're the one in control, only to watch someone you underestimated sit down at the piano you know and change the temperature of the entire world around you, without raising their voice, without asking for permission, just by being exactly who they are. If this story moved you, take a second to reflect on someone you have written off too quickly. Maybe it's time to see them again with different eyes. And if you're still holding back, maybe through any you love, thinking the world won't understand it, maybe it's time to share it anyway. Do not remember to subscribe our channel. Thank you.